What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the Learning to Hunt series for Maneuver Outdoors. This episode is dedicated entirely to the rut. Hope you guys are excited about it just as much as I am. Let's go ahead and get in this thing. Now, we don't have time to cover everything in the canopy of the rut for both understanding deer and how to hunt it. So we're just going to do a basic overview that's going to give you a general understanding of what the rut is and how deer act during it. So then that way when you're out there hunting, you can use that knowledge to make calls and make plays. And then as you gain more experience, you'll learn more about the rut and ways that you can exploit it to your guys' success. But we're not getting that in depth into this thing right now. So let's go ahead and keep moving. Now, first and foremost, what is the rut? The rut is the mating season of deer. Now that's all types of deer. That's moose, elk, caribou, everything that's basically a hoofed deer species, their mating season is called the rut. Now the reason why the rut is so important is it is the coveted deer hunting time frame. Because deer make mistakes during the rut because they're thinking about other things rather than their own survivability. And that's specifically talking about bucks, the male deer of the species. Now, a lot of the actions and things that I talked about will be general things that apply to all species of deer. However, each species does act a little bit differently and has different time frames during the year in which they go into rut. But we're going to be focusing specifically on the white-tailed deer. Now, the white-tailed rut typically happens sometime between October and November time frame. Generally late October, early November for the majority of the country. The farther north you go, the later in that season it's going to happen. The farther south you go, the earlier in the season it's going to happen. This can be anywhere from 10 to 14 to 15 days of heavy action. Now, there will be rutting action is the term that we use. There will be rutting action before those time frames and after those time frames. However, the peak rut period will be a 10 to 15 day range sometime inside that range. So what's going on is that all the does in the area are entering estrus. It's time for them to mate, sire the new generation of deer going on, and the bucks are sensing that. Their testosterone levels are shooting up to an extreme level, and then they're starting to focus heavily on that mating cycle and trying to actually pass their genetics on to the next generation. Now, like I said, the reason why everyone likes hunting the rut so much is because bucks make mistakes during the rut. They have other things on their mind rather than just survivability. The reason why this happens is because during the rut period, like the pre-rut time frame, which is, a couple of weeks before the actual rut kicks off, a buck's testosterone levels skyrocket. I want you to basically think about it this way. A buck entering the rut is going through puberty in essence every single year in terms of testosterone levels. They are starting from like prepubescent testosterone levels that are just there for survivability and to function the body to suddenly they are now, an 18-year-old dude first time out at a bar just trying to get some. Like they're going from that in a couple of weeks. Now, does during the rut are going to be doing most of the same actions that they've always done of bedding, food, and water, going through those times that we talked about during episode 1. However, they're going to start to spread themselves out a little bit more. They don't really want to, when a doe is entering estrus, is what I mean. When they're entering estrus, they don't stay together as like a family group. They're going to spread themselves out. They're going to find solitude, find a more secluded area, maybe a smaller feeding area, while they go into that estrus cycle. Now, this doesn't mean that all of the deer that you see like in your same field are going to scatter to the winds for 10 to 15 days and you're going to have to hunt specific ones. Does only enter estrus for about 2 to 3 days. So if you have a doe group of like 7 to 8 does, over the course of those 10 to 15 days, there may only be 2 to 3 of those in estrus at the beginning, middle, or end, and they're going to cycle their way through. Now, once they've completed their estrus cycle, whether they've been bred or not, they're going to return to their doe group and they're going to return to their regular pattern of life. Now, if they didn't get bred during that time, roughly 28 days from that initial estrus cycle, they will go back into a estrus cycle again, and then we call that the secondary rut. And then bucks will go back into the same sort of actions then. That's not as heavy action during that time frame, but it is still a mating season that happens. Now, in the weeks leading up to the rut, bucks are going to start becoming more territorial. Specifically, mature bucks, the more dominant bucks in the area, are going to be increasingly getting aggressive, while younger bucks are going to be starting to stake out their own claims, try to figure out where they fall inside of that hierarchy that is the rutting season. Now, one of the things that you're going to start seeing in the woods is you're going to start seeing rubs and scrapes. Now, rubs are when a deer takes his antlers and scrapes them against the side of a tree. He's also going to take the center of his forehead right here, and he's going to scrape that against the tree to leave his scent behind. Now, this action serves several purposes. The first purpose that you're going to start seeing it pop up for is to get the velvet off of their actual antlers. So during the spring and summertime, they grow those antlers back out after they fell off in the previous winter. When they're growing out, they have like a layer of skin over the top of them. They're not always like what you see here with this antler sitting in front of this. This was a shed that I found last year while I was out squirrel hunting, but it's going to grow out to this over the course of the spring and the summer. Once it's actually time for that velvet to come off, that deer's going to take these antlers and he's going to put it against a tree and he's going to rub all around it and to get that skin actually off and then expose this antler out to the rest of the world. That's signifying that he's starting to get ready to start the rut. Now, the other thing that he can use it for is that he's going to be strengthening his neck and getting himself ready to fight by basically practice fighting against a tree. He puts his head and his antlers up against it and he starts working his neck out, moving it up and down, moving that tree around to get himself a really nice strong neck, so that way when it comes time to actually fight another buck over the rights to breed, he's going to have a good strong neck that prevents him from getting hurt and allows him to actually win that confrontation. Now, a single rub isn't a solid indicator of deer being in that area consistently. The deer may just be passing through, or a buck might just be passing through that area and just decides that it's gonna work out real quick, or just needs to scratch an itch or something, so it makes a rub real quick and then continues on. What you want to look for, a good indicator of bucks being in that area, is you're gonna see a literal line of rubs, and those rubs will be like anywhere from every single tree to, 30, 40, 50 meters apart from each other, large rubs on larger trees spread out as you go down, like, an entire finger. That entire finger over 200 meters may have 10 rubs on it. That's an indicator that the deer is in that area consistently, and that's a spot where you can start to actually look for them. The other thing that they're going to start doing is they're going to start making scrapes. Now, a scrape and a rub can be done consistently with each other at the same time, but a scrape doesn't necessarily have a rub with it. Now, what a scrape is it's a buck marking its territory to let all the other bucks in the area know that this is his spot and his area. Same way, your dog pees on fire hydrants, or, cats pee on things. Like, a buck does the same thing in a scrape. He's going to dig it out with his paws. He's going to dig out a large open space. He's going to pee in it. There's going to be, typically, if there's a tree nearby, and there generally is, there'll be a branch hanging down over the top. It's called a licking branch is what we call it. He's going to literally break that branch so it hangs down, and then he's going to leave his scent from both his mouth and his head on that. He's going to leave his scent marking that there, saying that this is my area. Now, multiple bucks can use the same scrape. It's kind of like a, dominant thing, like who's in the area right now. Like, they're going to go and smell that and be like, oh, like, someone else was here, I need to leave my scent now so everyone knows that I'm the dominant buck now. So if you find an active scrape, it's a really good place during the rut to be able to sit over the top of, because you can pretty much guarantee that you'll see some sort of buck action going to that scrape consistently, whether it's every single day, every other day, but you can almost guarantee that sometime, if you sit there long enough, you will have a deer walk in front of you into that location. Now, if you come across an area where it seems like every single tree has a rub on it, there's scrubs all over the place, there's deer sign everywhere, and it seems to all be buck sign, what you could be entering into is what we call a core area. Now, a core area is basically just the general living area of a buck. Remember in episode 1 when I talked about a mature buck may bed in the same exact place for basically his entire life? That's going to be established as his core area, what we know as the core area. That is just, in essence, where they spend their daily lives. They may travel outside of that for the rut, or if they get pushed out of there, but if they're going to spend the majority of their time in this area, you're going to start seeing lots of sign in that area. That's an indicator of what we call the core area, or just basically like his house. That's the way you should think about it. Now, not every buck is going to stay completely in their core area during the rut. A lot of bucks, particularly the ones that aren't the dominant buck of a singular area, are going to start traveling, like legitimately just start walking around several miles in some cases, looking for hot does that they're going to be able to get a chance to go with. So they'll do this by literally finding travel routes that they can go up and down. So like along the edges of rivers or creeks, they'll just follow those things up and down, or long draws, ridge lines, anything that allows them to move, cover distance quickly from point A to point B. They're going to start traveling along those things as quickly as possible to try and get into a new area that maybe has less bucks and more does, so they can get a better chance at trying to get a hot doe. If you're able to find those consistent travel routes, you can exploit those by sitting on them, and you may see, if you're in an area with a heavy population, you can see upwards of 10 to 15 deer walking along the same exact trail as they're trying to find new space for them to settle down in. Now, what a buck does when it actually finds a hot doe and they become receptive and they start to interact with each other, he's going to try and force her away from any competition. He's going to do is he's going to start following that doe, or chasing that doe is the term that we use. Now he's going to chase that doe and drive her down into a secluded location, if he can, where he can see anything else approaching from them. So, like backing her into the back corner of a field or heavy underbrush, something where he can see anything else that's coming along to that doe. Now the main thing that he's concerned about is he's concerned about other bucks coming in on his hot doe. So he wants to get her away from all of that. So he's going to chase her and drive her down into a small location where he can easily see any oppositions coming towards him. This location is going to be an area that is probably super hard to get to except for one direction. Once he's got her in that secure location, he's going to enter what we call the lockdown phase. Now, the lockdown is basically just he's got his doe, he's got his area, he's in his hotel room, so he's going to stay there until he feels like he's completely done his business and he's finished with the doe, and then they will both leave. This can be anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days of them staying in that general location doing their thing until it's all over. It basically comes down to when that buck feels satisfied and that doe gives him the indicator that she has been bred, and he is now able to go find another doe in order to start the whole process over again. If you find a buck and a doe in a lockdown scenario, what you should really do is you should focus on the actions that the doe is doing and not so much the buck. As long as the doe's there, the buck's going to be there. He doesn't care about anything else but what that doe's doing until he feels that he's done his mission with that doe. So you can use that to your advantage by playing almost primarily off of what the doe's actions are to get close to that buck in order to get a shot off at him. Now, another thing, bucks are so focused on finding hot does, locking down hot does, and doing their thing that they will actually start to forego eating. They may munch occasionally, but they're going to be so focused on does that they're actually going to start to almost starve themselves because of how focused they are on it. The one thing that they will consistently come back to, though, is water. Now, like in episode 1, I talked about water and how deer are going to always come back to it. This is where you can really start to use it to your advantage. That water might become the primo spot for you to sit because those bucks need to get some sort of water, and they're going to be cruising. Like if you can see videos of it, and then if you actually see one while you're actually hunting, you see a deer or buck running around during the rut, and they're going to be looking like they're panting like a dog. Like their mouth's going to be pulled back, and it's going to be really wide open. They're not going to have it closed. They're going to be like literally panting because they're running around for so long trying to get in and find those does. Alright guys, now first off, you'll notice that my clothing in the background of this video has changed, and that's because it's been a couple of days. During the making of this video, we actually moved into a new house, and I've been focusing primarily on that at the moment, but I wanted to add a couple of things to this video before we wrapped it up. Alright, so the first thing, you probably noticed that I didn't talk about any sort of calling or interacting with the deer with either, rattling or grunting calls. The reason for this is that if you were a new hunter and you asked me what type of calls you were supposed to do or how you were supposed to call, I would advise you actually to just hold off on calls until you got more experience. If you do want to use calls, use them extremely sparingly, and I highly recommend that you watch a lot of videos, do a lot of research first before you even start to use them. But I recommend first time out hunting on your own, I would avoid using them or using them extremely sparingly because they have that potential of actually driving the deer away. And this is because deer can tell when something sounds fake. If it doesn't sound like a deer, they're not going to go near it because there's so many people using calls, there's so many people mimicking it that the deer will learn that if it doesn't sound right, they're not going to go near it because it doesn't sound like an actual deer. Now, the other thing that I didn't talk about that a lot of people would talk about is the moon. Now, the reason why I avoided the moon is there's a lot of controversy in the hunting community as to whether the moon actually affects deer or not, and how it affects it, or how it affects them. As a new hunter, I would say you will eventually learn about it, and you can take your side about whether the moon is a factor or not, or how it actually affects deer. But as that first hunter, don't worry about it. Just understand those basic concepts that we're talking about in terms of just deer movement and how they go about. As you gain more experience, you can start to understand how and when the moon does affect deer movement, or if it doesn't affect deer movement, and you can do research bringing it up to that. But as that first hunter, just don't worry about it. It's one of those hotly debated topics in any community. Hunting community, that's just one of them that is something that just everyone really likes to hotly debate. All right, hey guys, if you like this video and you want to see more of it, hit a like and subscribe. Throw a comment down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. What do you want to know? What is something that either I didn't cover or something that you just want to know? I'll address those either in a later video or directly in the comments for you guys. Hope you guys had fun. I'm going to see you guys on the next one.